go.
What was that, Vahe? You want to share with the entire class?
Sam Mellinger tells everybody hi.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome to SportsBeat Live. This is our weekly show where we talk Chiefs. It's a special edition of SportsBeat Live because we're coming at you on a Monday, the week of the Chiefs playoff game, and we'll also do this again on Thursday. But we thought, now that we know that the Chiefs, the Chiefs' opponent, the Jacksonville Jaguars, we know the day, the time of kickoff, Saturday, 3:30 p.m., even the network. NBC. I thought we would kick the week off talking Chiefs with you, even on a holiday. It's a federal holiday. It is Martin Luther King Day, and I was almost late to this show because I was going through some of my. You know how you get caught down the rabbit hole of looking up things on the internet. And I was looking at speeches, right? I was looking at famous speeches. And of course, I Have a Dream is one of my favorite speeches. And so that led me to some John F. Kennedy speeches and others, trying to figure out what my favorite one is. Does anybody have a favorite speech that they prefer? I Have a Dream is at the pretty much at the top of my list. Spend 5 minutes today on YouTube and listen to that again because it's amazing. But does anybody have another one that they want to throw into the onto the list?
Blair, I love that one, and maybe it has to do with us being of a certain age too, right? Growing up during that time, and I always remember, to tie it together with the Chiefs a little more, that Willie Lanier arrived that fall in Washington D.C. Right around, I don't remember the date of it, but he was in D.C. when it happened, when he started going to school, and he talks a lot about Dr. King, and it's tough to put anything else on that tier. That's the only thing I would add.
Yeah, I think just sports related. I mean, Jimmy V's thing is something I watch on YouTube like every year or so.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean that's a really great one. And Lou Gehrig's speech too is something that I think still resonates today.
And most of our listeners, or some probably know this, but Lou Gehrig played his last game in Kansas City before he went to the Mayo Clinic right from here and learned of his diagnosis. So that's got a certain extra resonance from that. I'm glad you mentioned that, Sam.
Also, I think we should mention Jim Mora's, and on the verge of the Chiefs getting in the playoffs, I think we should mention that one as well.
Playoffs? It's a classic. It's a classic. And as long as we're going there, the Mike Gundy speech has been good. He's a man. He's 40. So, but we digress. Let's talk Chiefs and NFL playoffs. It is a good mixture of the of games this weekend. But 5 of the 6 have been played. There's still the Cowboys Tampa Bay Bucks game tonight in the NFC, but we had a blowout to start it with the 49ers over the Seattle Seahawks and Brock Purdy doing some crazy things. Jesse, you must have covered an Iowa State KU game with Brock Purdy at the helm. Because, probably, I'm sure they were just terribly lopsided games, but do you have any memory of Brock Purdy as a college player?
No, most of the memories kind of go together because they were mostly KU beatdowns. So I'm sure he beat down Kansas. We were talking over the weekend, guys, about how Cameron Dicker, the kicker, I remembered him from Texas because he kicked a lot of extra points and field goals against Kansas in those particular games too. But no, Shanahan really seems to have it going on there. It's kind of one of those great problems to have, which is it seems like any quarterback they plug in plays really well. And with today's salary cap and what you can do on a rookie quarterback contract, if you have that sort of cheat code, that's really good. So obviously the 49ers and then some really exciting games. But for the Chiefs, you take a step back. If a month ago we'd told you that the Chiefs would have the bye and then play a home game against the Jacksonville Jaguars in their first game of the playoffs, man, Chiefs fans would have signed on that as quickly as they could have. So I know that we'll talk all week about the matchup, the breakdown on Trevor Lawrence is playing well, how Doug Peterson presents challenges and knows Andy Reid really well. But the bottom line is the bottom line. You're a 9.5 point favorite in this particular game at home to make the AFC Championship game, and the Chiefs would have signed up for that absolutely at any point in the season.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that the matchup here in a minute. In fact, we'll skip the Jacksonville LA Chargers game for a second, and we'll go to Buffalo takes a 17-0 lead over the Dolphins, and I went and did something else. I come back and the Dolphins are leading 24-20 and have the ball. So amazing effort by Miami, but some terrible clock management down the stretch sabotaged an attempt at a comeback there. How about the New York Giants? I guess by seed, really the only upset, I think, is that by seed it's the only upset. And hats off to Brian Daboll, the Chiefs' offensive coordinator the year before Andy Reid got here. Of course, Mike Kafka on the sidelines for the Giants doing a heck of a job. And then, gosh, last night's Bengals Ravens game, that was pretty amazing to see Baltimore with Tyler Huntley at quarterback staying with the Bengals throughout that game, and of course 100-yard or whatever 98-yard fumble return flips the game toward the Bengals. So just anything else about those games stand out to you guys? Let's just save Chargers Jacksonville for a moment, but the other games closer than I expected. I think the two AFC games.
I definitely felt that way, and boy, you could see Baltimore had every chance. I felt more like Baltimore might win that than Miami might. I don't know why, just because of the way the game was unfolding. But when you get a 98-yard fumble recovery that goes the other way like that, 14-point swing basically, right? I mean, it just doesn't seem meant to be. So better team won, but I think we first saw that dunk attempt with Patrick in Cincinnati, and it worked out. I wonder if that's a coaching point this week, though, that's not maybe really the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, the Miami game, I could not believe the collapse in coaching over those last 2 minutes. I mean, you've got a rookie quarterback who I think needs even more time probably in the huddle, and I've never seen a team get a delay game on a 4th and inches play. And I wonder if they don't want to go with a quarterback sneak, because I hadn't seen Skylar Thompson run under center yet. And I could be wrong on that, but I didn't recall him running a play under center. And it made me think that they just didn't have a play ready, but they had like 12 or 13 extra seconds because of an injury there, and they still were not able to get a play in. Mike McDaniel is subbing in guys with 12 seconds left on the play clock. It was just inexcusable there, and Skylar Thompson gave him a chance to win. Jalen Waddle did not help him out. The 2 or 3 drops. I actually thought he dropped the one they gave him credit for as well, but I actually thought Skylar Thompson played better than the numbers showed. The interception of the possession you're talking about, Blair, up 24-20, is pretty inexcusable, but also thought his coach put him in a bad spot. I mean, a rookie quarterback is on the verge of taking a safety. You've got to imagine he's going to throw the ball. You need to give him some check down options to throw the ball, and they didn't. So I do wonder what the future holds for Skylar Thompson, though. I mean, obviously, local kid, local to Herbie as well with the K-State ties. So there you go. But I wonder what the future holds for Skylar. I think he played well enough to at least be on a roster this year, and that was not something that was certainly not something that was guaranteed going into training camp, that he was going to find his way onto an NFL roster.
Yeah, that interception came on a 3rd and 19, and he was backed up. I don't think he was throwing from in the end zone, but he was near the goal line when it happened, and it was I think it was Elam that made the interception. It was a heck of a play. Went up high to get it, so a great play, and that flipped the game back. But you're right. How many times Miami used all their timeouts in the 4th quarter just to avoid delay of game penalties and just inexcusable management.
Breaking the huddle with 5 seconds on the. I mean, just and again to Sam's point. I mean, was it 3, 4, 5 times? A couple times they got away with it, I think, too.
Multiple times they got away with it because the biggest running joke in the NFL is that a referee has no ability to look at the zeros on the clock and know at that time whether or not the ball has been snapped. It takes them 3 seconds to look from the clock back to the play to see if the ball's been snapped and process that should be a flag.
Hey, Blair, two cents here on the weekend, and this has something to do with Andy Reid. When you look at the remaining teams still alive in the AFC, okay, 2 of those 3 teams come from the Andy Reid tree. Obviously, Sean McDermott from the Bills and now Doug Peterson with the Jaguars. So when you think of coaches in the National Football League, Andy Reid's doing something right. You got to give him credit for that. His guys do really well.
And the third team is the Eagles. So and the Chiefs could play. So there you have it. This could be the Andy Reid reunion tour. Go Doug Peterson, Sean McDermott, and then go back to the old stomping grounds and face the Eagles again. It
actually is a really relevant point, Herbie, too, because I think a lot of times when we hear the Eric Bieniemy stuff, which we're hearing it again now, sometimes you hear, oh, well, Matt Nagy failed in Chicago, so that probably doesn't do him any favors. And it's like, well, yeah, that's one example of a really, plentiful tree that he's got. And you just mentioned other guys that have certainly worked out with him. And by the way, Nagy actually had some pretty good years in Chicago, even though it didn't end well there.
Yeah, and to be interesting, like if Nagy was with Ryan Poles, because obviously Poles comes from the Chiefs tree, and when Nagy was there, they tried to shove Mitchell Trubisky down his throat. He didn't get to pick his quarterback. So it would be fascinating if Nagy, in another universe, was with Ryan Poles and those two were able to pick their quarterback. They might have turned out differently in Chicago.
Well, and Nagy's name is permission to interview with who was it? Was it
Titans.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And Bieniemy, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm just trying to keep my candidates straight here. So, yeah. And didn't Nagy have 2 playoff seasons of his 3 years in Chicago, 2 out of 4, something like that?
Yeah, out of 4.
Yeah.
Took him there his first year. Yeah.
Lost to Doug Peterson in one of those games, the double doink field goal game, I think. And, yeah. And what have the Bears done since then? I don't know. Exactly. I just know that when the NFL draft is coming to Kansas City in a few months, the Bears will be on the clock. In fact, they're on the clock right now. So I expect a ton of Bears fans to be in town for that overall number 1. Okay, so the other first round game was wild card weekend or super wild card weekend. I hope we can ditch that. The NFL decides to ditch that title. It's ridiculous. Anyway, wild card weekend was the Jacksonville Jaguars down 27-0 over the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think before we get into Jacksonville, we should discuss what this means to the Chargers. And of course, what few Chargers fans there are calling for Brandon Staley's job. I don't think that's going to happen, but this is the kind of loss from which changes are made. Or is that not true, Herbie? Don't you lose a 27-0 lead? Someone's got to pay for that.
You got to look at it. At a minimum, you have to look at it. Brandon Staley, I think, like when you think of his decision making, and especially the last week of the season, when that game absolutely meant nothing to affect their seeding purposes, and he went out there and he didn't get Mike Williams hurt. Mike Williams got hurt, and then Nick Bosa also was hurt, but he played. A lot of decision making there, and the Chargers got to think to themselves, we have this ultra talented roster outside of the injuries, and when these guys are healthy, we have a talented roster. Why aren't we getting over the hump? Why aren't we meeting the expectations of being the offseason AFC West champions? We're finally going to dethrone the Chiefs, but it just doesn't play out that way. Sometimes you do got to take a look at that.
Yeah, that's one of those inexcusable ones. My only, as from a Chiefs perspective, my only regret was the lead wasn't 29-0, because if the Jaguars had come back from 29-0, they would have taken Andy Reid out of the NFL record book for biggest playoff collapse of all time, which is 28. I believe I'm right about this. Certainly right about the margin, the 28-point loss to the Colts.
I think also, if anything, the Chargers and Jaguars game should serve as a warning to the Chiefs. You jump out ahead, you got to keep your foot on the pedal. You cannot let up at all, especially in the postseason.
It was like Chiefs Broncos in Denver earlier this year.
Oilers Bills was 32 points, right, Blair?
You're right. That's right. Yeah. You're right. I need to keep up. I should know.
Well,
that.
it's Oilers, so you've had a while to keep up with that,
Yeah, with you telling me football history, I know I've got to go back to school now. All right. So what do we remember about the regular season game? Bob suggested the Jaguars beat themselves there. 2 missed field goals, a touchdown called back. So I don't know about that. Chiefs dominated the game, -3, I believe, in turnover margin that game. It was 27-17. Chiefs win. They got up 17-0 or 20-0 in that game. Made mistakes. That was Mahomes had a pick. Isaiah Pacheco had a good game numbers wise, 82 rushing yards, but also lost a fumble. And Jody Fortson also lost a fumble in that game. So, but I just don't remember the Chiefs feeling terribly threatened that afternoon. I want to say that game came after the Titans, where they did have a primetime game against Tennessee and struggled to beat Malik Willis in that game. But the next week against Jacksonville, thought that they came out and played, kind of following the Chiefs' theme this year. They win the game and lose the turnover battle. So I'm just wondering what anybody else has recollection of that game.
Well, we promised Herbie we wouldn't bring up the Fortson thing, first of all, Blair.
My bad.
I mean, Patrick Mahomes had a field day that game, and I think it's all set up for him to have a similar game. The Jaguars are built to where the strength of their team is up front, and they are really weak in the secondary. So this is going to be a game where if the offensive line does its job, Patrick Mahomes is going to have a really good day. They might need some help. I think you could see a lot of Jerick McKinnon because of that, because pass pro is always vital, but even more so in this game when you've got a team that can rush the passer but cannot guard the receivers downfield. So I think you're going to see quite a bit of Jerick McKinnon, but I really think Patrick Mahomes is going to have a big day.
Yeah, a couple of things from that game. You're right, Sam. I mean, this is really where passing offense takes over. And we talk about how the Chiefs are good week to week to week. It's because they have a great passing offense, and the Jags do not have a good pass defense. Coverage is bad. Tackling is bad. So that's how you can overcome 3 turnovers, losing the turnover battle. If you remember, Jacksonville had the surprise onside kick that they recovered. Chiefs overcame that and still were in the driver's seat. A couple of things to think about, though. Number one is Cisco on the defense, the Jaguars guy who came in and laid the wood on Juju Smith-Schuster and MVS. Guys were very emotional after the game about that and taking that pretty personally. So I'm sure we'll be asking those guys about Cisco this week and potentially going up against him again. The second part, we were talking a little bit earlier about Brandon Staley. He's a great defensive mind, but it seems like the team is kind of undisciplined at times. The game management sometimes isn't there. It seems like with all these coaches, like you kind of try to figure out the trade-offs, like what they're really good at, but you're trading off this. I will say Doug Peterson, what he's been able to do from the Andy Reid tree, he does a lot of things well, but he's also mastered the aggressiveness part of this. And that's what we saw this last game against the Chiefs, where surprise onside kick was going on 4th downs. This is probably where these two teams are the most different. Andy Reid a couple years ago was very aggressive with Patrick Mahomes in his offense. That's backed off a lot this year. So the one thing that would concern me about the Jaguars, we saw this in the game on Saturday where they went for 2 after they got the personal foul penalty, ended up winning the game by 1 because of that. Doug Peterson is as aggressive as any coach in the NFL right now when it comes to those 4th down decisions, go for it decisions, gambling decisions. And let's be honest, the Jaguars need some crazy things to happen to overcome this 9.5-point spread. So if I'm the Chiefs, that makes me a little bit worried that they're going up against a coach who understands he's the underdog and understands what he needs to happen to make his team win this particular game. And so I would expect a lot of different crazy things from the Jaguars in this game to kind of mix things up a little bit to try to beat the Chiefs.
Just a quick thing you reminded me of, Jesse, that the way that onside kick came, if I'm not mistaken, that was the game where the Chiefs had some confusion on what to do with winning the coin toss, and elected to receive to start the game, which the Jaguars had to really pounce on the idea that they were then going to take advantage of the confusion. I think the Chiefs even had some personnel confusion getting out on the field. That was a mess from the start that way. The only other thing that stood out about that game as I look back at it is the Chiefs did have 5 sacks that day. And I think, that may be part of a blueprint here too, especially with did Lawrence throw 3 interceptions in the first half of the 4 against San Diego or against the Chargers? Boy, talk about living in the past. But I think, as far as he's come, he still is a guy that obviously you want to predicate your game plan to rattling.
The Jaguars actually have a really good offensive line this year, but their left tackle got hurt, Cam Robinson. I think it was in early December, and he's out for the year. So their offensive line has looked quite a bit different since his injury. And a lot of the metrics really like the Jaguars, but you look at that from a season overall perspective as far as their offensive line goes. So I think it's a matchup where that kind of fits what we talked about in training camp, which is I think the Jaguars are going to devote a lot of attention to Chris Jones on the interior, and George Karlaftis, who's come on of late, is going to have to win on the outside. I mean, that's the way that teams have historically made the Chiefs beat them up front in the playoffs. There's a reason that Chris Jones does not have a sack in 12 games in the playoffs. I think part of that is something that might be in his head, but a lot of it is just because the attention that, when you get this time of year, you spend extra time on these game plan sorts of things. It's not to say teams get lazy in the regular season, but these are the sleepless nights in the postseason where you spend that extra time, and that extra time tells you that you got to devote 2 guys to Chris Jones. And guys like George Karlaftis, Carlos Dunlap, Mike Dana, those guys are going to have to win one-on-one battles on the outside, but particularly against the Jaguars with the backup left tackle.
This can be a scary matchup on offense, Sam, because you mentioned the offensive line protects decently for the pass. Trevor Lawrence has come on. And again, if you're going to have a team that struggles in an area, we talk about with the Chiefs, I mean, turnovers are things that are kind of fluky. They kind of come and go game to game. I would not bank on him having 4 turnovers again this week like he did last week. So that's coming on. And then the run blocking is not that great, but Travis Etienne is really great. He sometimes just makes up for bad run blocking, and he's able to go out there and get a lot of yards on the ground too. So this feels like one where the Chiefs are going to kind of have to outscore their problems, which they should be able to do offensively. But again, playoff atmosphere, a little bit of nerves. They had to sit out that first game. How will they respond to the last playoff game that they've had, AFC Championship against the Bengals? Are there any tightness, any lingering effects from that? That's sort of the thing. And then you add it to Doug Peterson, who knows Andy Reid as well as anybody, and a team that is not going to be passive. They are not going to play the Brandon Staley route and just, be very punt the ball on every 4th down, everything like that. I mean, he's going to go for it. He's going to go for it because he knows he needs to be able to beat the Chiefs in this game. So somewhat scary in that regard. But, I said this off the top. I mean, you look at the numbers, 538 gives the Chiefs like an 84% chance of winning. The implied odds at Vegas would give you about 80%. So if you're saying 80% for the Chiefs to advance the AFC Championship game, you take that every time. So Chiefs just got to take care of business. But there are parts of this matchup where you look at and you would say there's things to be worried about with Jacksonville.
The Jaguars have won 5 in a row, and you'd say, well, that's the end of the year. They're playing AFC South opponents, but they beat the Cowboys. One of those 5 wins was a victory over the Cowboys, and showed a lot of character in their playoff win over the Chargers. So this is a good team coming in here. They were 3-6 coming into the game at Arrowhead in the regular season, dropped to 3-7, and they're now, including the playoff, 10-8. So they figured it out there. And Doug Peterson's a hell of a coach. What a great hire for Jacksonville, and what a contrast between him and the previous coach, Urban Meyer. What just done a fantastic job in Jacksonville. And I think Jacksonville's going to stay a contender as long as he's the coach there. I mean, and with a quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, who has shown the ability to be in the upper echelon of quarterbacks, at least in the AFC, which is a pretty it's a well populated group, and he. Despite his first half troubles in the playoff game, he ends up with as many or one less touchdown pass. Was it 3? I think 4 picks and 3 touchdowns. So he rallied and had the great play on the on the touchdown on or was that the 2-point conversion where he went over with the ball? I can't remember that now. But it's the same play that Tyler Huntley tried and lost the fumble that got returned for the touchdown in the Ravens game.
The key point there is perhaps that he's 6'6", and Tyler Huntley's probably, I don't know, they probably list him as 6'1", but I'm not sure he's 6'1". Anyway.
All right. Hey, guys, very good conversation. So good that we'll do it again at our regularly scheduled time, which is Thursday at 10 a.m. Because the Chiefs play on Saturday, their schedule changes this week. There will be a lot of availability from the Chiefs on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Nothing on Friday, and of course the game at 3:30 on Saturdays. The first, I think this is right, first playoff game of the divisional round. The evening game is Eagles Giants, and then we know the next day the Bills Bengals play the first game, and tonight's winner of Tampa Bay and Dallas takes on San Francisco in the second game on Sunday. So divisional round next week. Chiefs have not lost a divisional round game since Patrick Mahomes has been quarterback, starting with that 2018 win over the Colts. Hey, Herbie, can I ask you one last thing?
Sure.
Did the AP get the All-Pro selections right? 4 Chiefs made first team.
Yeah, I think they got it right. They absolutely drilled it. And then also giving the shout out to Joe Tooney and Creed Humphrey as second team All-Pros. You could make an argument that especially Creed should be a first team All-Pro eventually, but he's still got a couple of players ahead of him right now who are on the twilight of their career. So it's not going to be too long until Creed Humphrey makes that first team.
Okay, it was Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and punter Tommy Townsend. How about that?
I wonder what a former Chiefs punter thinks about that.
Indeed. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. George Howard, the fourth, our producer. Great job, George. Thank you so much, and enjoy the day off if you're taking it. Okay, guys, we'll talk to you on Thursday.